Some facts are useful. These are not those facts. Today's list is packed with things that happened for absolutely no good reason and somehow made the news anyway. From a talking seal to sweet seawater, millionaire cats, and famous heads that ended up in chimneys, every fact here is real, documented, and kinda pointless, which is actually why we kept them. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 pointless facts that are weirdly fascinating. 25. The talking seal. Okay, when I say talking, it obviously comes with a caveat. Hoover wasn't really talking, but he was remarkably good at mimicking human speech. Hoover was found as an orphan seal pup off the coast of Maine and was raised by a fisherman during the earliest weeks of his life, which meant he was exposed to human speech on a daily basis. He eventually came to live at the New England Aquarium and started throwing those sounds back at anyone standing nearby.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here!
Researchers later compared his vocalizations to human speech and found that he used the same structural patterns that create vowels and consonants, putting him in an extremely small club of mammals capable of learning sounds this way. He even seemed to use his human-like voice more during breeding season, which suggests he may have been showing off. Obviously, if that's the case, it might be the strangest flex in the animal kingdom, and I'm absolutely fine with that. 24. From alley cat to millionaire. Tommaso was a former alley cat who accidentally became one of the wealthiest pets on the planet. His owner, Maria Assunta, was a wealthy widow with no children who cared far more about her cat than about distant relatives or institutions she didn't trust. As her health declined, she decided to make sure Tommaso would be taken care of after she was gone. Her solution was simple and very Italian. She left him everything. When Assunta died at 94 in 2011, Tommaso inherited an estate worth around $13 million, including cash and multiple properties across Italy. Because a cat can't exactly manage real estate, the money was placed in trust and administered by her nurse, who had promised to care for him. Tommaso was still alive and living comfortably in 2018, and that's where the paper trail stopped. 23. Mumbai's Seawater Mystery. In August 2006, residents of Mumbai rushed to a beach after the seawater turned sweet. Some believed it was a blessing. Others thought it could cure illness. Either way, crowds formed fast, and bottles to take some home came out just as quickly. Authorities warned everyone to stop drinking it, which didn't help. This particular creek feeds into the Arabian Sea and normally carries a mix of sewage and industrial waste, which makes mystery sweetness a deeply concerning development. Scientists later concluded that the recent monsoon flooding probably diluted the salt content for a short time. The next day, the water tasted completely normal again. 22. The plane that sailed to Hawaii. In 1925, Commander John Rogers led a team that attempted the first non-stop flight from the mainland to Hawaii. Their PN-9 No. 1 actually covered most of the distance before their fuel calculations failed them. That left the crew sitting on the open ocean with no power and nothing but time, which is a terrible combination when the closest land is hundreds of miles away. Since radios of the era needed engine power, they had no way to call for help. So they leaned into the only option they had. They pulled fabric from the wings, rigged makeshift sails, and simply sailed there. It took them 9 days to travel 450 miles, ending up close to Kauai, at which point a submarine spotted them and towed them to the closest harbor. 21. The Bowmanville POW Riot. If you've ever needed proof that the Canadians are a civilized bunch, just Google the 1942 riot at Camp 30 in Bowmanville. The POW camp housed hundreds of German prisoners who were living in relative comfort. The prisoners gardened, swam in the old school pool, and could even go skiing if they promised not to escape. It was about as calm as a wartime prison could be. That changed when an order came down that all the German POWs had to be shackled after the disastrous Dieppe raid. The Germans at Camp 30 refused and barricaded themselves inside buildings. In retaliation, about 100 Canadian guards and trainees were sent in with baseball bats, hockey sticks, and water cannons to flush out the holdouts. Nobody died, and the riot ended with order restored, the Canadian way. 20. The fastest man on Earth. For real. Most people test new ideas on equipment. Colonel John Stapp preferred to test them on himself. He worked for the US Air Force in the early jet age, and he wanted real numbers about what a human body could handle during violent acceleration and sudden stops. So, he climbed onto a rocket-powered sled in New Mexico and let the engineers fire him down a track at speeds no one had ever attempted with a human on board. On December 10, 1954, the sled reached 632 miles an hour before slamming to a stop in just over a second. The impact hit Stapp with 46.2 times the force of gravity, or 46.2 Gs. He stepped off the sled with burst blood vessels in his eyes and a body that felt like it had been hit from all sides. But he still gave a full report, and those descriptions became the foundation for safety features that pilots depend on today. 19. Spain's first would-be pilot. We've all heard about the Wright brothers, but long before they made it to our history books, Diego Marin Aguilera tried something his neighbors were absolutely not ready for. In 1793, he built a handmade glider with flapping wings, climbed a nearby hill in Spain, and took off. According to the historic reports, he reached about 16 feet in the air and covered more than 980 feet before a metal joint snapped and sent him crashing to the ground. He survived, which should have earned him some respect. But unfortunately, the people in his town decided no ordinary man could fly without help from questionable forces and made sure the flying machine didn't survive the night. He never attempted to fly again and died at the age of 44. 18. Milk versus mildew. Not a lot of people know this, but some vineyards actually spray watered-down milk on their vines to keep powdery mildew under control. The fungus grows incredibly fast, so growers look for anything that stalls it. Milk works perfectly because its proteins, especially casein, make it harder for the mildew to take hold once sunlight hits the leaves. The mix is usually a simple blend of milk and water, and as long as it's applied on a steady schedule, trials have shown that it can match the performance of certain chemical sprays. That's why you'll see it used in most of the organic vineyards, as well as a couple of conventional ones. 17. The world's most famous sheep. I'm sure most of you remember Dolly, the first cloned sheep. And if you don't, well, Dolly was, in fact, the world's first cloned mammal. She came into the world on July 5th, 1996, at the Roslin Institute near Edinburgh, grown entirely from a single mammary gland cell. At the time, most scientists believed that specialized cells didn't have all the instructions needed to create new life. Dolly proved otherwise. Despite her unusual start, she lived a regular sheep life among the flock at the Institute. She even had 6 lambs over the course of 3 years. But sadly, things took a turn in 2003 when scans revealed tumors in her chest, and the decision was made to put her down. Now that could have been the end of it, but Dolly was too important to simply fade away. So she was taxidermied, preserved, and is now displayed at the National Museum of Scotland. 16. The Neighbors. Reality TV landed with a bang at the end of the 90s, with the birth of Big Brother and everything that notoriously followed. But it had been around much longer than that. In the 70s, a show called The Neighbors decided to put neighborhood gossip on television and let contestants publicly hunt for the neighbor who said it. It was the level of cringe you usually only get at family gatherings. Producers gave the contestants clues, reactions, and just enough bait to make them doubt every friendly wave they ever shared across the driveway. No one threw a punch Jerry Springer style, and the drama never went off the rails, but you could see the panic behind the smiles when a contestant started narrowing down the suspects. 15. A famous head. Oliver Cromwell was famous enough during his life, but his head outdid him after he was gone. When the monarchy returned in 1660, King Charles II wanted to make an example out of the man who had helped remove his father. Cromwell had already been buried for 2 years at that point, but that didn't stop anyone. His body was dug up, put through a posthumous execution, and then beheaded. The head was mounted on a spike outside Westminster Hall and left there as a public warning, until bad weather finally knocked it loose. One of the guards then hid it in a chimney, but the head didn't stay there forever. After a while, it fell into private hands and started making the rounds among collectors. It moved from one household to another for years, until a set of researchers finally took a close look at it in 1935. Their examination lined up with everything known about Cromwell's appearance, age, and the damage done during his posthumous execution, and the head was quietly handed over to Sydney Sussex College, the school Cromwell once attended, where staff finally buried it on the grounds. 14. Snakes in the nursery. Some screech owls figured out that the best way to deal with nest parasites is to bring in something that eats them. Researchers have watched adult owls drop Texas blind snakes into their nests and leave them there on purpose. Once the snakes settle in, they start eating the mites and small parasites that cling to the nest lining and the young birds. Owlets scratch less, stay calmer, and get to grow up with fewer infections. And weirdly enough, the snakes benefit too. They're protected from predators, they get regular food, and they're tucked into a nest that stays warm even at night. So, it's a perfect win-win situation. 13. Macarons or Macaroons. Macaroons and Macarons might as well come from a different planet. A macaroon is the American classic you've probably seen at bake sales. It's a coconut-based cookie, heavy, chewy, and often dipped in chocolate. No one worries about finesse when they make them. A macaron, on the other hand, belongs to a different universe entirely. These come from France by way of Italy, and rely on a delicate meringue shell in the form of 2 crisp berry cookies that sandwich a filling. They can be anything from buttercream to fruit puree. The only thing the 2 treats share is a name, but once you've tried both, you stop mixing them up for good. 12. Fast fashion's Afterlife. A lot of the secondhand clothing people donate overseas doesn't stay in their own country. Much of it moves through sorting warehouses and cargo ships until it lands in markets across Africa. So much of it ends up in Ghana specifically that the locals have coined a term for it, Obroniwawu, which translates to dead white man's clothes. The phrase took hold because the garments are usually in good shape, and many believed the only reason someone would part with them was that the owner was no longer alive. Some of the clothing gets breathed into new life by upcyclers. Others become waste that lines riverbanks and beaches. The flow is so overwhelming that one Ghanaian activist, Yvette Teta, actually swam 280 miles of the Volta River to help map where all that discarded fabric ends up. 11. The Dino Birds. Hodsons already look unusual as adults, but their chicks take it a step further. When they hatch, each youngster comes equipped with a pair of claws on its wings, and those claws aren't decorative either. The chicks use them to haul themselves across branches, cling to bark, and slip into nearby vegetation whenever something threatens the nest. Flying only comes much later. What keeps scientists so interested is that this feature has more in common with ancient birds. Hodson chicks hold onto a trait that mirrors what some of the earliest bird species, in all likelihood, used to get around long before strong wings became the norm. 10. Homicidal Sleepwalking. In 1987, a Toronto man named Kenneth Parks slipped into a deep sleepwalking episode that ended in one of the strangest criminal cases Canada has ever seen. While unconscious, he got into his car in Pickering and drove roughly 12 miles to his in-laws' home in Scarborough. He entered with the key they had given him and carried out a violent attack that left his mother-in-law dead and his father-in-law gravely injured. Still asleep, he returned to his car and drove straight to the police station and told the stunned officers he thought he had killed 2 people. Parks had a long history of severe sleep disorders, and specialists testified that his brain was still in slow-wave sleep during the attack. The jury found him not guilty in 1989 on the grounds of non-insane automatism, and the Supreme Court of Canada upheld that acquittal in 1992. 9. The 1-hour president. In 1913, Mexico delivered a political record no one has managed to beat. Pedro Lascurain became president for less than an hour, a length of service so short that historians usually just round it up to make it sound respectable. His rise was the result of a coup that removed President Francisco Maduro and Vice President José María Piña Suárez, both of whom were murdered a few days later. As Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lascurain was next in line, which meant the job fell straight into his lap. His entire presidency came down to one official action. He appointed General Victoriano Huerta, the architect of the coup, as his new Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then, Lascurain resigned on the spot. His brief moment in office managed to leave a long shadow, though, especially since Mexico plunged even deeper into instability during the years that followed. 8. A Tale of Two Bears. Okay, real quick. Take a look at these two flags. Can you spot the difference? New Bern's flag looks almost exactly like the banner of Bern, the Swiss city that inspired its founding families. The resemblance isn't a coincidence. Swiss immigrants from Bern settled in coastal North Carolina in 1710 and used their hometown's imagery as a way to anchor themselves in their new landscape. The black bear, the diagonal field, and the bold colors all made the transition across the Atlantic with very little editing. Only one detail didn't make the trip. The Bern flag includes a red appendage on its bear, a common bit of European heraldry. When New Bern adopted its own version, it kept everything else the same and simply went with a cleaner, simpler bear. 7. Nutting stones. Archaeologists have found thousands of nutting stones, and they all point to the same bit of practical ingenuity. Each one is a simple stone with a shallow dimple worn into its surface, either from long use or from someone creating it on purpose. Early communities used those hollows as steady spots to crack walnuts, hickory nuts, acorns, and any other hard-shelled food that needed a little help opening. A tap with another stone did the work, and the dimple kept the nut from rolling off or getting crushed into dust. We've found them near seasonal camps, riverbanks, and places where people gathered year after year, so they were part of their everyday food prep. 6. Fish odor syndrome. People with trimethylaminuria, better known as fish odor syndrome, give off a strong fishy smell through their sweat, breath, and urine because their bodies can't break down a compound called, fittingly, trimethylamine. Most of us clear it out easily, but when the enzyme that handles the step doesn't work, the trimethylene builds up and leaves the body with the smell still front and center. The condition isn't harmful, but it can make daily life really difficult. As you can imagine, a lot of people have to deal with heaps of embarrassment and a lot of stress before they even learn what the condition is. Managing it usually comes down to changing what they eat, figuring out what makes it smell stronger, and finding routines that help them stay comfortable around other people. 5. The pill that bites back. What's the first medicine you grab when you have a cold or a headache? If it's acetaminophen, listen up. In the United States, poison control centers get more than 100,000 calls a year about acetaminophen overdoses. Around 56,000 people end up in ERs, a few thousand need hospital care, and roughly 400 to 500 die from liver failure linked directly to the drug. The UK has the same issue. Their paracetamol overdoses drive a steady number of deaths and liver transplants every year. The problem is that it's incredibly easy to overdose without even realizing it. The drug hides in dozens of cold and flu mixes, sleep aids, and pain relievers, so doses can build up fast. Early symptoms are vague, which also delays treatment. If someone reaches the dangerous range, they may need an antidote, or, in the worst cases, a liver transplant. 4. Adolf Lou Hitler Marak. India has its fair share of unusual names, but none of them quite stand out like that of Adolf Lou Hitler Marak. He's an actual, honest-to-God politician from Meghalaya, and he has served in state-level government positions while representing the Nationalist Congress Party. His name obviously grabs attention everywhere he goes, especially outside India, where people expect some kind of statement behind it. The truth, however, is far less dramatic. In parts of Meghalaya, it isn't unusual for families to choose Western-sounding names without focusing on their historical baggage. Marak has said more than once that his parents basically just liked how it sounded. 3. Absidy. Old Adolf in India isn't the only guy with a strange name. Believe it or not, there are over 373 people living in the United States named Absidy. Yes, as in, that is their real name. Oh, and that figure came from 2017, so who knows how many we have by now. It's spelled ABCDE. It's pronounced Absidy by some families, and the inspiration 100% comes straight from the first 5 letters of the alphabet. Most of the time, the name pops into news stories because someone is surprised it exists, but it's merely part of the broader naming landscape here in the US. 2. Quake by crowd. We've been the cause of more than one earthquake. Concerts, sport arenas, and other huge crowds have all shaken the ground hard enough for seismic instruments to notice. One of the best examples came from Peru's World Cup qualifier in 2017. When Jefferson Farfan scored, the celebration was so intense that an earthquake detection app in Lima sent out an alert because it picked up the vibration from the thousands of fans jumping at the same time. Seattle's famous Beast Quake happened in 2011, when Seahawks fans reacted to a Marshawn Lynch touchdown and the spike showed up clearly on the local seismic monitors in Seattle. Metallica fans pulled off something similar in 2015 at Lane Stadium during Enter Sandman. Even Taylor Swift fans managed to join the club in 2023 when researchers found measurable ground vibrations during some of the louder moments of her Eras tour. 1. Egypt's medical mix-up. In the early 1900s, a lot of people in Egypt thought that boys went through a kind of male menstruation. It wasn't all that strange in their view either. A lot of the boys started passing blood in their urine, so families started treating it as a normal milestone. The same way you talk about a first haircut or hitting a growth spurt. Nobody realized it was a sign of something much more serious. The truth only came to light much later when scientists started digging into the pattern, realized the boys were dealing with schistosomiasis, a parasite you can pick up just by coming into contact with contaminated fresh water. It's absorbed into the body, settles in the urinary tract, and eventually causes bleeding. Kids who spent their afternoons swimming or working near canals were the most exposed, so the infections piled up year after year. And sadly, because the symptoms were mistaken for a natural phase, treatment often came too late. And that's where I call it for today. But I have a question for you. Which fact would you tell your friends first just to mess with them? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're still wide awake after this video, I guess that really depends on what time it is. You'll like our other video here, 25 strange facts you definitely didn't learn in school, because it's waiting for you, like I said, right here. In it, I will give you a very good reason for why people in the old photographs never smiled, and it had nothing to do with the long exposure times. That link should be popping up here any second, like I just mentioned several times. I'm screwing this one up. But as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any new content, and never miss out on me messing up these outros. And I'll see you later.